We'll try to be respectful of everybody's time.
Yeah, let's do it. Everybody up.
We'll do it. Hold on one second. So let's call the meeting to order. And committee, it's a big day today, kind of a lot on our plate. And then the noon hour is kind of jammed as well. And that telecommunications bill is up in appropriations. We had discussed the possibility of modifying that bill with an amendment to get rid of the prepaid wireless portion of that, and then we wouldn't need the appropriations. But of course, that's all in there now, and it's going to appropriations. The trouble is, I have to be in 4 different things over the noon hour, and it would be really helpful if one of you could go and shepherd it out of appropriations, and you can certainly tell them what we're up to, and it's not that you'd have to know anything technical about the bill, but is that possible? Could one of you?
We team up before we go on.
Okay, that would be great. I'll let you guys figure that out, but it's the Telecom Act. And the Vice President, Chairman of Appropriations can tell you when that'll be heard and we can address it. Thank you for doing that. And I believe they're meeting, just to give you the heads up, hold on. They are meeting in W113 over the noon hour. I hope that's correct, but that's what I was set up online. All right, back to the meeting. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File 78, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms. Senator Hutchings' bill. Senator Hutchings, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Case and members of the committee. Congratulations on a new committee room. This is really nice compared to the other. This bill, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms, is here for the 3rd time. And you have a handout that kind of gives you an idea what started this whole thing. We'll get that handout out.
It's coming around.
A candidate sent out a mailer that actually looks like an actual request for an absentee ballot form. And several people filled it out and sent it in. And from what I understand, that form was actually not processed because it was invalid.
Yeah, and Senator,
Yes, sir.
we've got 2 different colors. Are they the
You
same
know what?
thing?
Excuse me, Chairman Case, I went to the copier, put that in there, and that beautiful orange color came out, and I said, let's just make this exciting for the committee. So you can choose what type of excitement you want, dull gray or the bright orange.
Okay.
Whatever, makes you want to say yes to the passage of the bill. It's really
Did you
easy.
have other copies for the audience that might be interested?
If they'd like, I don't know, anybody.
Does anybody, we usually try to have things available for the witnesses.
I gave some to.
We could share.
Okay, I'll let you, don't take them all, because, well, God willing, this does not come back. We'll get it out and signed.
This lady would like a copy, and there may be others too.
Thank you so much, sir.
Back to you, Senator.
The bill has not changed from what we've heard for over the last 2 years. No amendments were made. It basically says that no person except a county clerk, a secretary of state, or their designee shall distribute an absentee ballot request form to any qualified elector unless that qualified elector, and this is the element here that is so important, unless that qualified elector specifically solicits an absentee ballot request form. And that is the bill. Not much to say other than that. Like I say, you've all heard it before, and I just would appreciate a yes vote on it.
Committee, any questions? And Senator Hutchings, is this bill exactly the same as it left this committee on previous times?
Yes, sir, exactly. Not one period has been changed on this bill.
I'm not talking about how it came to the committee. I'm talking about how it left.
How it left the committee, how it left the committee of the whole as well. Nothing changed.
So it's the same as the bill that we sent out.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Landon.
So, thank you, Senator. Appreciate you being here. I just want to make sure that I'm remembering the bill. So what we're really talking about is a mailing that would come back to our county clerk, and it says on it, "I request that you send me an absentee form." Is that the purpose of the bill? Or were these actual forms that were being sent to people?
Chair,
I'm a
Senator,
little confused,
let's
sorry.
let the senator finish his question first.
correct.
Then Senator Hutchings.
Chairman Case, Senator Landon, the mailer that went out was, I don't think it was meant to have people sign it and fill it out and send it in. It was just a mailer. What we're requesting here is that when someone does want an absentee request form, they specifically request it, not somebody else sends you a form and says, fill this out and you can get your absentee request form. You can't get a group of absentee request forms, go into like a church and say, hey, everybody fill these out if you want an absentee request form. You have to specifically ask for that form. Thank you, sir.
Anybody else? Senator Dockstader.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Chairman, my question is, it came out of here, nothing's changed. Help us remember what happened after that.
Senator Hutchings.
Am I allowed to comment on what happened once
Sure.
it left our chamber?
Well, Senator Hutchings, the rules for committees are a little bit more lax. Let's try to be respectful of whoever you're talking about.
I'll try to do
Yeah.
that. It passed, Chairman Case, Senator Dockstader, it passed our committee, and it was assigned to a committee in the other chamber. And I sat and waited and waited and waited for it to get on the list. And the last day that bills could be heard, I sat in the committee and I'm like, why didn't this get out? And I was told that by the chairman that they forgot to put it on the list. So it just didn't get out. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator, Chairman Case.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Who else would like to testify on this bill? Ms. Langford.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. I'm Mary Langford, and I have the honor of representing the county clerks of the state of Wyoming, and I have a couple in the room as well this morning. This is an old friend bill. It's been around, this is its third go. And to add just a little bit to the senator's story, this originated out of the 22 election. And, it's a great campaign deal to send out absentee ballot request forms to voters and say, send them in and you can get your ballot and that type of thing. And that's the way that was set up at that time. This limits the only people that can send out absentee ballot request forms is the Secretary of State's office and the county clerks. And that's for them to be able to do their business. And this bill, again, it says the same thing that it said 3 times in a row. It says the same thing 3 times now. It was worked quite heavy the first time with a number of amendments and tweaks and that type of thing, but we will be able, the clerks will be able to administer this, and we actually really need it to do the work that they do to take care of absentee ballots. I want to just register one statement that I've made the past 2 times, is the title to this bill is misleading. And the title to the bill says Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms. This bill is all about the distribution of unsolicited absentee ballot request forms, not distribution of unsolicited ballot forms. It's not ballots, it's absentee request forms for ballots. And with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions, and thank you for the opportunity this morning.
Questions for Ms. Langford?
Ms. Langford, thank you. I'm still trying to get my arms around what might take place in the county clerk's office. For example, if I were to write in, you must get unsolicited sorts of mailings from constituents just saying, hey, can I get an absentee form? So you get other mailings, right? I mean, you get people requesting a form. And if one of these came in, that would just be the same thing, right? It would just be somebody requesting a form. I'm trying to get arms around just the solicitation itself, to ask you to send me a form. You don't really care what form that's in, right?
Ms. Langford?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, you can request the form, or you can request an absentee ballot by email, by mail, or over the phone. If it comes in over the phone, it's reduced to a form. This is not a statutory form. It's just, there's a list of information that you have to to verify their voter registration so that you're able to send them an absentee form. So it's not an official form, really. But people would call. They may call. They may, more likely than not, they're going to call you on the phone and say, hey, send me an absentee, and this is where I want it sent. As opposed to solicit a form and send it back. Or, they might come to the clerk's office and you might have them fill out the form so that you can process, because they can request absentee ballots the full year of the election. So they may come in like in March and say, hey, I'm not going to be here this year. I need, or, I'm going to be gone on election days. I need absentee ballots for the 2 elections, or I just need them for the upcoming election or whatever. So it's business. It's doing business. But I think the thing that's most concerning, and just a little history, is that there have been, the political parties used to send these out years ago. A county clerk has a list of absentees that are ready to go when absentees can be sent, and sends those ballots out. And then you get a request from someplace and requesting another absentee ballot. It gets confusing for the voters. And it also gets confusing for the clerk, because, you've already sent those folks a ballot, and then you're contacting those folks to find out, what, did you not get your ballot? Or are you confused? Whatever's going on. So it's better management to have one source of those forms if someone needs to request them, or if they need to be sent out. One other thing too is that during COVID, the Secretary of State's office did send out statewide absentee ballot request forms to the voters, because they were concerned about them getting to vote and being concerned about going to the polls with COVID and that type of thing, because there were quite a few restrictions on polling places during that time, and they wanted to make sure that people didn't go vote just because they were concerned about being exposed. So there was that at the time. This cleans it up.
Anything else from Ms. Langford? Senator Steinmetz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Ms. Langford, I was just wondering what the enforcement mechanism is if someone breaks the law and they do send this out, regardless of this new law passes, what would be the ramifications?
Ms. Langford?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, I would imagine what would happen is that the clerk would investigate that and try to find out, who was doing this, if it was just a group or a candidate or whatever, and try to get it shut down. And there isn't penalties and any of that kind of stuff, I don't believe, in the law.
But it would be a
specifically for
violation of the
those.
election code.
Yeah, it
So
would be.
It could potentially have a.
It could have something, but, yeah.
And under the election code, there are 2 levels of penalties. There's a misdemeanor and a felony.
Yeah.
Senator Dockstader?
Ms. Langford, are you saying where they already, it's precedent setting during COVID, they sent out these absentee ballots? Do you think that it's already taken care of without this bill? Or do the clerks want this bill?
Ms. Langford?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Dockstader, I think the clerks would want this bill, because it eliminates any other people in promotion of campaigning, to use this as a campaign tool. It would eliminate, if you're receiving anything that has to do with absentee ballot requests, it's coming from the Secretary of State or it's coming from your county clerk.
Thank you, Senator. Anybody else? Let's go to Mr. Rubino from the Secretary of State's office. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Case and members of the committee. Joe Rubino, I'm the Policy Director and Counsel for the Secretary of State's office. I don't have much to add. The Secretary of State is in broad support of this bill. And happy to point to Senator Steinmetz, your question. 22-26-120, violation of election code when specific penalty not imposed. It specifies that if the election code does not impose a specific penalty for the willful violation of a provision prohibiting a specific act or requiring discharge of a specific duty, then the penalty is a misdemeanor punishable by the penalty prescribed in 22-26-112. 22-26-112 is a misdemeanor offense punishable by not more than 6 months or a fine of not more than $1,000 or both.
Okay, anybody else for Mr. Rubino? Thank you very much, Mr. Rubino. Let's open it up to public testimony now, if that's all right. Stay close, but give some room for somebody else to be in. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address this bill? Is there anybody? Yes, Ms. Herman.
Thank you, Chairman. Committee, Marguerite Herman with the League of Women Voters. And as everyone knows that we do a lot of what's called voter service during election seasons. And it includes many, many things, including telling people how to register and how to vote. And I think on occasion I guess I'll find out. What the bill doesn't seem to address is maybe, and I just Googled one search, and I went right to the request form on the Secretary of State's website. So if any other kind of a voter service organization says, here's the link, are you telling people, is that distributing the form to telling, well, I guess I would just like to know that, is it the physical handing of a physical piece of paper to an individual without them expressing an interest in it? I mean, it's, how you enforce it? A neighbor says, boy, I'd sure like to vote. And you tell the person, well, you have to call and you have to give them this information. So in lieu of the fillable PDF, as you just heard, you could do other things and contact your clerk's office with an informal. You don't use a form per se. There is no official statutory form. And so I guess it gets kind of squishy about what does it mean to distribute the forms unsolicited, or if you give them the form in the form of a link to a fillable PDF. I am not sure for a group that does a lot of voter service and helps people find access to registration and voting information. It's hard to know what is considered forbidden because things are so accessible, and the fact that there is no official form in the custody of a clerk. And I just offer that as just a little heartburn, because we don't want to violate the law and or do anything to cause problems, but we do give out a lot of information. And an example of, say, a party or a church that hands out a bunch of physical forms, what about the one who puts a link into hyperlink into a thing? Boy, just make sure you get your ballot, put your request in soon, and here's a link. What is that? And so anyway, I just offer that as something that probably should be addressed, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Ms. Herman, let's break that down a little bit and look at the bill. The language of the bill says no person except a county clerk, the Secretary of State, or their designee shall distribute an absentee ballot request form, physical form, to any qualified elector. There's a word unless that qualified elector specifically solicits an absentee ballot request form. To me, that sounds like the unless would allow, if a person asks someone to give them a form, that could happen. The next sentence says, for purpose of this subsection, absentee ballot request form includes any document that claims to be or that is deceptively similar to an official election document. And then here's another piece, and that is provided to the qualified elector by mail, email, or by any other means. So I don't think it covers the link, but I do think it would cover an electronic document sent to them. But the unless is a very big unless. It would seem to suggest that if any voter could ask for one to be given to them, and they could be given. League of Women Voters could give these to people if they asked for them. That's the way I read this bill. So I think I'm getting nods from the back. So how's that help you?
Okay, well, and Mr. Chairman, I appreciate that, but once again, if an email goes out with a hyperlink that takes them straight to the fillable PDF, is that not distributing the form?
I don't think so. I think that's a link to the form. But it's a link to the official form. So,
But Mr. Chairman, I would just simply add.
Go ahead.
There is no official form. That is a form that is useful because it does contain all the information that must be relayed in the form of, in the request, must include all those data sets. And but it's just a way to organize that on a piece of paper. It's not an official form.
I think if it comes from either a clerk or the Secretary of State, it may not be the prescribed exact same form, but it's an official form.
Anyway, Mr. Chairman, I just relay my caution.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Herman? Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Herman. Who else would like to address this bill? Who else would like to address this bill? Do we have anybody online that would like to address this bill? Okay. I would give you guys perhaps an opportunity to address Ms. Herman's concerns. Would that be all right? Would you mind helping with that, Mr. Rubino? Thank you. Senator Hutchings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chairman,
Can I
please.
speak, Chairman Case, can I speak candidly?
Of course.
In old military terms, I would call that throwing a turd in the punch bowl.
Oh, that one's not permissible.
All right.
Let's
This-
try to be less
yeah,
colorful.
This has nothing to do with sending or giving out links. It is just simply, like I say, it's a distraction, and I'd rather not have that even brought up in the bill. We're trying to eliminate sending out these absentee request forms by any other method than through the clerk or the Secretary of State. You have to physically ask for it or state, I want this information. And if the League of Women Voters wants to give out links, that is fine, Mr. Chairman. Or Chairman Case.
Thank you. And Senator Hutchings, just to go one further, if an organization wanted to actually give out the forms, looks to me like they could if they were requested by the recipient, because there's that word unless.
I would agree with you, Mr. Chairman.
ahead.
Chairman Case, wholeheartedly.
Thank you. Mr. Rubino, do you think we were in the zone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think that's the operative word, is if it's requested by that elector. And that was some of the discussions that we had when the bill was originally brought in 2023. That was part of our concern, which the original bill language had requested by an elector. Well, any elector could request one for anybody else, right?
Right.
That was the issue that we had with the original language. This is, if it's requested by that elector, then that's fine for
Okay.
any group.
Follow up, Senator Landon.
So, Mr. Rubino, thank you. If I'm out campaigning and I've printed some of these off from your office, I just have to be very careful at the door to not say, I have one of these if you want one, right? Then I'm okay?
Mr. Rubino.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, I think I'm getting a little bit of feedback
I
here.
think we'll kill a mic up here. We got too many mics. You need one. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's the statutory construction, is it's really preventing what we all know happened in 2022 and what was widely reported on. I mean, I don't have to repeat it. The headline, voters alarmed after receiving absentee ballot request forms from Cheney campaign. It was in a mass mailing. I mean, that's really what the difference is. If somebody requested it, that's different.
So let's get down to a very fine point though, Mr. Rubino, and I think Senator Landon did nail something. If I send out an email that says, and I'm a private organization advocating for a particular, I mean, it may be nonpartisan, not election education, it's strategic. I send out an email that says, if anyone wants a absentee ballot request form, we'll get one to you. That's not, well, I think it is permissible because they're not actually giving the form out. In essence, they're soliciting the voter to ask for one. And I think that would be legal under this bill, but you want to think about it?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, it says distribute. If you're not distributing, then if you're asking if people are interested, I think that's different.
And then
You're pointing to the Secretary of State's website or the county clerk's website, that's different.
And Senator Landon, when he goes door to door, he could carry a stack of them and say, would you like an absentee ballot request form? And as I read it, he's not violating the law because they will say no, and he will not hand it to them. They will say yes, and he will shake their hand, hand it to them, circle his name maybe, I don't know, but that seems to be legal. Senator Hutchings.
Chairman Case, the way I look at it, it's like we're kind of getting into the weeds here. When I went out to campaign, I would send people to the website. When they asked me about absentee voting, I never carried any kind of documents. I guess it could help somebody, but I guess you would have to wait till the voter solicited that from you, Senator Landon. And I guess they could. And maybe you'd be a great campaigner if you had a few with you, but sending them to the link, I think, is the better way to handle it. Thank you, Chairman Case.
Let's be clear.
Yeah.
If we ask a voter, would you like an absentee ballot request form? That is not illegal. And if they respond affirmatively and we hand them one, that's not illegal. Let's go to Senator Boner while we're thinking about that.
Yeah, so, hey, Mr. Just make sure we're clear. I mean, you still have to send in the request for the absentee ballot. It's not like you can circle their name right there, right? There'd be a couple days delay at least, right? You're just requesting an absentee ballot. So it's, I think just make sure you keep our fact pattern straight here, I think. And so what we're trying to get at is this idea, it says right in the bill, it's just not solicited. There's no interaction. This drops out of blue, and there might be some confusion as to what it does. And I think that's what we're after. So.
Yeah, and remember, we're not talking about the ballot, the absentee ballot. We're talking about the request form. So if Senator Landon wanted to write his name on another piece of paper and put his card there, say, don't forget about me, that would be, but his name is not going to be on that form. Or graciously supplied by Senator Landon upon request of a voter in my district. Anyway. Anybody else? Thanks, you guys, for helping with that. We're going to go final on the testimony.
Thanks for the good debate, Chairman Case.
Thank you. All right, committee, you've heard testimony. What is your pleasure? Got a motion by Boner, discussion? You know, the bill's not exactly the same as last year. I think as we sent it out of here, it was House Bill or Senate File 97 last year, and I'm not sure the last clause was there. It was this committee that put that claims to be or is deceptively similar to an official election document. And the rest of the language after document on line 5, page 2, and continuing on to line 6 appears to be new language. I think it's fine language. I don't see any problem with it, but it's not exactly the same as last year. So just fine points. So any amendments? Any discussion? How about calling the roll on this one?
This is a roll call vote on Senate File 78, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms. And I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, before I do the roll call, do you want LSO to fix the title?
I think, thank you, Ms. Sharp. I think it'd be great if we change the title. And we can do that. Yeah, let's just come up with a motion for the language we want. Senator Dockstader.
Motion to amend prohibition on distribution of unsolicited absentee request forms for ballots.
And that would be in the catch title as well as, I think it's okay on line 2 because it says absentee ballot application forms. So it'd be only the catch title.
Okay, now I just want to clarify. So on, Senator Docksteder moved that on page 1, line 2, after absentee, where we would strike ballots and application and insert request forms for ballots.
I think, Ms. Sharp, I think we're actually talking about the unnumbered line prohibition on distribution of unsolicited ballot forms. Now, maybe they won't want us to change this, but if we could change this, we'd like to. Is that fair?
I'm sorry, I don't, which unnumbered line?
Just under the little short line right here.
Oh, you mean just in the catch title? Oh, I
Yeah, catch title,
misunderstood.
that's right.
I'm pretty sure that in drafting, they were trying to keep it on one line. Senator Dockstader, being in layout and design as you are, I think that's probably what was going on there.
Well, they got some room.
Yeah, there's 60 characters. So I'm sorry, so what would you like it to say again?
Well, we would like it to say, instead of prohibition on distribution of unsolicited ballot forms, we would strike ballot and say absentee request. And you might be able to get rid of the word forms and just say prohibition on distribution of unsolicited absentee requests. That might save you some space. Look, LSMO may not even want to do this. So this is, they may push back on it. But if they can do it, I think the committee would like more direction than that. Is that fair, committee? Should we vote on it?
Absolutely.
Wait, I'm going back to the Dockstader, the maker.
Mr. Chairman, I'm fine with that, but are we past the point we could have the clerks come back and comment?
Ms. Langford, would you like to comment on that?
Mr. Chairman Case, Senator Docksteder, the suggested language that I have is that it would be absentee ballot request forms. Distribution of unsolicited absentee ballot request forms.
One more time, Ms. Langford, thank you. Go ahead.
Distribution of unsolicited absentee ballot request forms.
We can try.
Okay, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
So Senator Dockstader, that's friendly?
Yes.
Committee, the LSO may not want to do this because it's in their system and it's all, but if we can, we'd like them to say, to eliminate the catch title and replace it with distribution of unsolicited absentee ballot request forms. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. We'll see if this happens. This is a tentative amendment. I've never quite,
Worth a try.
sometimes another one that gets kind of crazy is when you add or remove a sponsor or co-sponsor, which can be done, but the LSO doesn't really like it. So let's, is there anything else on the bill? Let's call that
No,
roll.
Mr. Chairman, this is a roll call vote on Senate File number 70, or Senate File 78, maybe distribution of unsolicited absentee ballot request forms, or currently prohibition on distribution of unsolicited ballot forms. Senator Boner.
Aye.
Senator Dockstader.
Aye.
Senator Landon. Senator Steinmetz. Chairman Case.
Aye, thank you. Third time's the charm, Senator. Good luck out there.
Have a good day out there, Senator.
I'm not quite sure. Don't worry. You bet. All the best. Okay, the next bill for our consideration. I see the sponsors in the audience. He's going to work his way up here. It's Senate File Number 87, Prescriptive Easement for Electricity Delivery. Thank you, Senator. And I see you're joined by all the friends that you have.
Downtown.
Senator, welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Case, Committee. Ed Cooper, Senate District 20. We're here today to talk about Senate File 87, which is prescriptive easements for electricity delivery. I'll give you a little background on this bill. It came to me from my local REA. In our valley, and really pretty much across most of Wyoming, when the REAs electrified Wyoming, they didn't really, that's back when things were done on hope and a handshake. And a lot of people didn't really worry too much about easements and right-of-ways. They just said, bring the electricity. Mom wants a new horse machine. So there wasn't a lot of thought put into the easements and the long-term future of where they were. And what we're running into now is, as these ranches have been, and farms have been sold off over the years, and the REAs are needing to go in and do upgrades on some of these older systems. And there is no easement. And a lot of these newer owners, there just wasn't, when they bought the place, there was no easement, so there's no reason to be concerned about it. But it has turned into a bit of a problem for access on some of these older systems. So that's the history of the bill. That's where it came from. And with that said, I'll let my colleague here explain it to you.
Are there any questions for Senator Cooper at this point? Well, okay, let's hear. Mr. Taylor, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean Taylor, Executive Director of the Wyoming Rural Electric Association. I want to thank Senator Cooper for working with us to bring this bill. He laid it out, the reason for the bill, quite succinctly. Changes in land ownership have made it harder for our crews to get access for wildfire mitigation, vegetation management, safety, and what we're asking. And let me start out real quick, Mr. Chairman. The bill before you is wrong. It says 5 years, that any easement that's been used for the same purposes for 5 years. We've worked with some of the landowners groups that will get up here after me, I'm assuming, and we wanted to change that to 10 years. And in that regard, we've worked with the landowner groups because many of those folks are our members of co-ops across the state. So we wanted to, we don't want to do anything nefarious, but we just need to have access to these easements. And as Senator Cooper said, as land ownership has changed, whether it's one big ranch sold to a different person or one big plot of land that's been cut up into, smaller pieces, getting access to those easements that have been unrecorded has caused a little bit of problem. The bill states that you can't change the use of the easement. You can't make upgrades. It's simply to get into these easements to do repairs, like I said, vegetation management, wildfire mitigation. And so that's the crux of the bill, Mr. Chairman. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for that, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you specifically point in the bill to that section? Because I was having a hard time finding that last night as I was reviewing the bill. Where exactly can they not change the easement, enlarge it, or alter it, or use it for another purpose?
Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, I believe that's on page 4, line 19, Romanet 3. It states may access, use, maintain, replace, rebuild, change, or repair the delivery system and surrounding area located within the easement in accordance with the law. If we need to make that clearer, we certainly can, and I've talked to a couple folks that may have some amendments that we need to make that clear, because that's our intent, is we just need to be able to access it, not change it or upgrade it without the landowner's consent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's totally clear, at least from that sentence, Mr. Taylor. It says may access, use, maintain, replace, rebuild. I mean, I would think almost in any situation you'd expect if you're rebuilding a line, probably they're beefing it up, taller poles or, I'm just not sure.
Mr. Chairman, and I agree, and it might not be clear, and that's why we're willing to work with whoever we need to make sure that that's clear, that any type of upgrade or change in use will be with the consent of the landowner.
Okay. Anybody else on this bill? Senator Boner?
Yeah, thank you for either of these gentlemen up here. Just wondering what efforts the rural electric associations have gone through to identify and where you don't have easements, and what efforts have you gone through to gain them? It seems like this could be solved in the private sector. So how many miles of line do you have that don't have easements on them? Do you know, and what efforts have you made in recent years to fix that?
Mr. Chairman,
Taylor.
Senator Boner, it's a good question. I couldn't tell you how many miles of line we don't have. As Senator Cooper said, when the co-ops were formed about 100 years ago, these were handshake agreements where the neighbors were helping their neighbor get power. The efforts that each specific co-op has gone through, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. We decided to run this bill based on what you all did 2 years ago for irrigation districts. And we based the bill off of that because they faced the same problem. We thought this would be a good way to try and handle it without, I guess, maybe the burdensome work of identifying every mile of line where we don't have an easement.
Senator?
Mr. Chairman, it just seems like the first attempt should be to solve this in the private sector, which I understand is the background of that water bill. And, it would be nice to have an understanding of the scope of the problem too. And so, if you know where your lines are, presumably you know where you have easements on some of them, is that correct?
Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, we know where where we started recording easements. We know that. I don't know that we have a handle on where the unrecorded easements are. Again, to your point, we know where our lines are, right? And if we needed to come back and identify every mile of line where we don't have a recorded easement, we could certainly try and do that, but we thought this would be a more expeditious way.
And I think we all should maybe remember that Mr. Taylor doesn't work for a utility. He represents an association of cooperative utilities, so which no doubt have varying practices and anyway, I'm just pointing that out.
Thank you.
Senator Dockstader?
Chairman, while we have the sponsor and Mr. Taylor at the table, what about reworking that wording for works with the sponsor while he's here?
Mr. Taylor, and do you have a suggestion, Senator Dockstader?
No, I'm gonna go to the sponsor for direction.
Okay.
Or his assistant.
And when you say on page 4,
Yeah,
the lines 19, kind of about, yeah, and sort of in this area, I might have a tag-on question too. The size of the easement isn't specified, it's sort of vague, and it's in terms of the type of delivery they have, the need. And I can see where you could have situations, Mr. Taylor, for example, where the area where the line goes is not suitable for a vehicle to travel in the boundary of an easement. I mean, that would happen all the time. You could think of terrain, and so you might have an area for where the line goes, and you achieve agreement on that, but you also may in the agreement have an area how the vehicles would come in and the other equipment if necessary. I mean, that could be specified, could not. to actually think that you're going to drive down the easement in all cases, especially if the pole's in the middle of the easement and, you know, and your trucks, you can't have a 10-foot easement with a pole in the middle of it and get a truck down it, you know? So there's, it's a complicated kind of area. It might even vary between landowners, I would assume. And I throw that out in terms of trying to come to some kind of agreement in the law. Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Dockstader, I think there might be a few people in the audience that are going to come up with maybe some either suggested language or I've talked to that we can try and
Great.
fix this if we get it through committee.
We'll just hold on that. Senator Steinmetz?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I was entertaining the notion too of putting it on page 7 under nothing in this act shall be construed to, and adding another subsection there instead of reworking the other wording. So that might be another alternative we could
Okay.
think about.
You want to just throw something out conceptually? And then the rest of the witnesses can think about it when they come up?
Yeah, so I was just going to add a Romanet 4. And so under subsection A on line 1, it says nothing in this act shall be construed to. And then if we added a Romanet 4 under the existing Romanets, and it may be, we may need to rework the wording, but allow the easement to be altered, enlarged, or utilized for a new purpose without the landowner's written consent.
Okay, let's just throw that out to the universe for right now. So, Mr. Taylor, did you have anything else, you and Senator Cooper, and then before we open it up? Oh, Senator Landon's got a question, apologize.
Just a real quick question, and I apologize if I missed this, but I'm wondering the 5 years versus the 10 years. Can you go over that again, Mr. Taylor, for me? So, seems like 5 is fine, but we want to go to 10, that you will have had to have provided service over that line, for example, for the past 10 years and not just the past 5. I'm trying to get my arms around that.
Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Landon, we initially had started at 5 years at the request of one of our co-ops. And then in talking to some of the landowner groups, they said 10 years would be better. I'm going to steal Mr. Moline's thunder. I know he's going to get up here and offer something longer than that. We figured 10 years we thought was a reasonable time frame that we could say, yes, we know we built this line 10 years ago. We've been using it for the same purposes for 10 years. 5 was too short, so we were happy to compromise it to 10 years.
Thank you for that.
Okay, one last question for me, Mr. Taylor. When you have new services or expanded services, do you get an easement at that time?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we do.
So, so these would apply to people that never had an easement, that have been as customers for a considerable amount of time, maybe 10 years, maybe more, maybe less. But for the most part, any new customers you've had that have had new or expanded service, you've gotten an easement for them.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thanks. Oh, because I'm being pulled in both directions. Ladies first, Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just going back to when we crafted the prescriptive easements on our structures for water, there was actually law that if that structure was in place when you purchased the land and it was visible, that was known to be, something there that people had access to, that conveyance or that structure, or, the historic use of that. And the bill was actually to clarify what existed and just bring more clarity to that. There were also some court cases, and I don't have all of that in front of me today. But is there anything in law that currently, we're just kind of tweaking? Because I would assume, if I've got a fence there for 10 years, then someone can't just go take the fence out, and I can't imagine they can come take your power poles out or deny you access, because that has been on the land historically. So is there other law pertaining to that? I didn't find it last night, but I was a little short on time.
Mr. Taylor?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Steinmetz, I don't believe there is any existing law that is similar to what the irrigation folks went through. Not that we've found.
Okay, Senator Bonner? You're okay? Okay, we'll hear from other folks.
Okay.
Who else would like to address us on this bill? Please raise your hand. Who's next? Yes, sir. Let's, want all three of you come up? Are you all going to testify? There's 3 chairs. We'll start there and we'll work around the room. Welcome. Who wants to go first? Who's going first? Let's start over here with this gentleman. We'll just go down the line. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chairman Case. Connor Nicholas, Bud Fallon Law Offices.
How do you do?
Thank you. I'm doing well. We, all 3 of us, are actually attorneys at Bud Fallon Law Offices.
Oh,
We
okay.
represent landowner groups, and
You're piling on. Go ahead.
that's right.
State your name and just
Yes.
give us some testimony.
Connor Nicholas. We are concerned about this bill, and I'll let Frank and Karen, my colleagues, discuss this as well, for many of the reasons that you guys have stated already. In fact, prescriptive easements is a very well-established law here in the state of Wyoming. And in fact, there's about decades of common law, case law that's out there discussing basically discussing how this works. And so the scenario that a power line would be crossing someone's land and it's been there for a long time and that a landowner could take it out likely is not, isn't actually a concern. In fact, one of the main cases, if you guys want to have some homework on this, is Powder River Ranch Incorporated versus Michelena, which was done in 2005. And in that case, it says that the Powder River Ranch asks us to consider other laws on prescriptive easements. Over the decades, this court has developed a rich history of case law on prescriptive easements that is uniquely tailored to fit our way of life. We therefore decline PRR's invitation to stay from our precedent. This is established law. Prescriptive easements are a thing that is well established in Wyoming. It's not favored in many scenarios, but there are many cases where prescriptive easements have been accepted. A scenario where a power line is clearly visible, a landowner can see it, and it's been of notice for 10 plus years. Under the law, that would be allowed. And so I'm concerned that the way this bill is currently drafted would allow for a greater expansion beyond what prescriptive easements allow in the state. And our greatest concern, I think, comes with the idea of the ability to upgrade, as Senator Steinmetz had mentioned in her questions, as well as the rest of you. The other thing that we see in this is just the open-endedness of the width of the easement. It allows for this easement to grow and change over time. So an easement that was originally a 10-foot easement for a distribution line, theoretically under this bill, could be upgraded to be a 200-foot easement if this became a transmission line and was used in that way. And so I think this bill is far too broad as it currently is drafted. And as prescriptive easements is an established law that has been litigated and decided by the courts for decades now, I would like to stay within that parameter as it is currently established. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions for, is it Nicholas?
Connor Nicholas.
Cotter Nicholas. So that's all of that is the last name. Thank you. Cotter Nicholas. Yeah, Senator Boner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're kind of keying off some similar concerns here, and just reiterate the terms of the agreement are a huge deal for the landowner. How wide is that easement? There's a huge difference between a 30-foot easement and a 60-foot easement, obviously, and so all it takes is, and I understand the need, you have to go fix your power lines, but that happens to be right in the middle of, when you're irrigating your alfalfa field, and that power line goes to alfalfa field, that has a huge impact. So the terms of the agreement are a huge deal. I think that everybody benefits in this situation from greater communication, and that means not taking the easy route, and maybe going out and negotiating some new easements if you don't have them. And so I was wondering if, I understand the need for the bill. I'm wondering if it'd help your concerns if there were a requirement for the co-op to negotiate in good faith or attempt to negotiate in good faith with the landowner before the provisions of this bill took effect. Would that help you?
Mr. Cotter Nicholas?
Chairman Case, Senator Boner. I would, that would help. The concern I would have is I think that's already the law anyway. And so by enacting this law and putting that requirement, is it changing in some kind of relationship that would be there anyway? And the way we look at it is there is eminent domain that would be available for this if that's required. I'm definitely not supporting eminent domain. Definitely would never hear me say that in here. I think that the way the law is currently created is one that is equal a playing field as possible. And I worry that a bill like this, even with modifications, I'm not sure what that would do to change the relationship before the parties.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else for Mr. Cotter Nicholas? Thank you, Mr. Cotter Nicholas. Let's go to the next gentleman. Oh, I'm sorry, do you have another one?
Yeah, sorry, just real quick, what's the name of that court case, real quick? Powder
River
Powder-
Ranch, I think.
Chairman Case, Powder River Ranch versus Makelena, it's 103 P3D 876.
Okay, let's go to the next gentleman. Green light, there you go.
Yes, Chairman Case, excuse me, my name is Frank Fallon. I'm a partner in Bud Fallon Law Offices. We're also ranchers in a few places here around the state. We have power lines, probably at least one of the type that's being discussed here. I think my concern is not really with what they're trying to do, as I heard this previous gentleman speak. Our biggest concern, as has been alluded to, is that there's no limitations on the scope. And normally when somebody has a prescriptive easement, first of all, as Connor said, it's not favored because it's basically somebody losing their property for nothing. And so the person who seeks to have prescriptive easement has the burden of showing several elements. Some of those elements are in the water bill that has been talked about, and they have been removed from this bill. So you almost can't hardly call it prescriptive easement because so many of the traditional elements that are necessary for prescriptive easement are not, or have been removed. And one concern I would have is if speaking on due process and that type of thing, is if you're the landowner and the notice you get is that somebody's filed on your property and they're claiming rights that, as we see, really are not kept in check, then what is your remedy? Now you have to go to the court, and does that mean now that the landowner has the burden of proof, which also then completely flips traditional prescriptive easement? I would maybe compare real quick to the water conveyance bill, and even though it has more of the protections and more of the sideboards for prescriptive easement, it's a completely different thing, because how likely is it that somebody can go get 10 times more water, in this day and age, and need a huge conveyance? But the reality that we're seeing is we have wind farms going in, we have solar farms going in, we have a lot of push for new electrical lines. Our law firm is busy with that right now every day in multiple states. And like Connor said, there is even if somebody doesn't have a prescriptive easement, there's also another remedy in the law, and that is condemnation. And of course, we're not wild about condemnation, but at least when you're condemned, you get due process and compensation, and this bill is set up to give you neither. So that is a serious problem for us, and it might make somebody else's life easier, but it goes around those basic due process protections that we don't always think are good enough, but at least they're there. It goes around those basic due process protections that have traditionally been in our law. And so without being, totally against the concept of what we're trying to do, or what they're trying to do, because we know it's out there, we think that the sideboards and the limitation to limit it to just to those areas would be important. And the other thing I'd like to say in response to a comment that was made about, places are sold and things change, that is also true with electric companies. We have places where we had co-ops not that many decades ago, where the board member was probably your neighbor. And as time goes on, some of those co-ops have sold. There's nothing that keeps them from doing that. And now they're owned by out-of-state for-profit companies, and you can't go complain to the board member. And they're probably in Connecticut or somewhere. And they hire lawyers that read all of the statutes, and they play every single angle in their favor. And so when we're talking about times have changed, we cannot just assume that the co-op, where you know the board member, is always going to be the case, because history shows that it's not always the case. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Mr. Phelan? Mr. Phelan, when you were talking about the board members and the co-op, I was a little confused. Were you suggesting that the co-op is sold, or were you suggesting that when they have an out-of-state board member? I'm not familiar with that happening very often, but
So
explain that to
Cheyenne
me.
Light Fuel and Power, for example,
Yes, sir.
was a wide co-op in Laramie County. And they sold, I think, first to XL and then sold to Black Hills. And I deal with Black Hills a lot, and I'm not throwing them under the bus, but I guarantee you, 30 years later, they're a completely different entity to deal with than when it was Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power and the board member lived somewhere not that far from you, because there are no board members now. It's not a co-op anymore, and co-ops can be sold. And so the point that I'm making is that, yes, landowners change, time changes, but the day when you could talk to the board member because he was your neighbor, you saw him at church or wherever, I'm not saying they're gone, but they don't have to stay there, because we have experiences where, and I think there's quite a few of them, more than I'm aware of probably, where the co-ops have been sold, and there's certainly not a limit on doing that.
So I was not aware at all that Cheyenne Light Fuel and Power was formerly a co-op of some sort.
Yes.
So,
And there was a board member, and you could talk to them. If you wanted to extend a line, it was inexpensive. They were happy to help you. If you just needed a couple of power pole places for a pole. Now it's like pulling teeth. You're looking at a couple of years, maybe not a couple of
Thank you,
years
sir.
sometimes. It's very expensive.
any other questions for Mr. Phelan? Anybody else? So I do understand kind of the concern here about upgrading transmission lines or pass-through lines, but this bill is establishing prescriptive easement for electricity delivery. And then on page 2, Romanet 1, it says delivery means the distribution or transmission. So there is transmission in there. It's not just distribution. So it could indeed, to your point, be a transmission line that, not just a service line. And I think that's your basic point, and that if there's more demands for upgrading transmission, this could turn into a big deal.
And lighter.
Yeah, okay. Anything else? Ma'am, you are next.
Thank you, Chairman Case. My name is Karen Bud Fallon. Let me make sure that I'm not repeating the point of,
That'd be good, because you got 3 bites out of the apple from one law firm.
yes,
Yeah, respect us on that.
yes, I do respect you on that. I guess my point would be that, sort of the same as Connor's, is if you look at the water prescriptive easement statute that you all did at 34-1-158, that many of the prescriptive easement requirements in that statute have been deleted from this bill. So for example, in the water conveyance prescriptive easement statute, it talks about how the easement had to be open and notorious, which means that the landowner had to see it. They had to know that it was there. That's part of the importance of a prescriptive easement. The other thing that the prescriptive easement requires that you had in your water conveyance statute is that the use had to be adverse to the landowner, so that the landowner knew and understood that his property right was actually being taken or tread upon by the conveyance. Both of those requirements have been eliminated in this new electric line bill. And so I think you are changing prescriptive easements and the requirements for prescriptive easements, and I think that's a problem. The first prescriptive easement in Wyoming was recognized in 1891. And the elements of prescriptive easement have been the same since 1891. And so with the water conveyance bill, you're still following those elements. With this one, you're not. And I think that's going to add major confusion to the law. And I think you're going to have a lot of court cases saying, well, we now don't have to prove part of the prescriptive easement elements because the legislature has taken them out in one bill. And I can see that this is going to be expanded. And we don't want to lose electric power to our houses. I certainly understand that. But if there is going to be an upgrade to a line, and now all of a sudden, instead of a wooden power pole that they had before, you're going to a much taller, much bigger structure that has 3 lines on it instead of just the one electric line to your house, I think that is a taking of private property rights. And I believe that the landowners ought to have the due process and just compensation that's required by the Wyoming Constitution and the US Constitution.
All right, thank you. Questions for Ms. Butterfield? Senator Landis.
Mr. Phelan, thank you. I don't have that statute in front of me on prescriptive easement, but can you just highlight a couple of things that are included in the process? You alluded to water. Can you give me an idea of what is absent in this bill that you'd like to see in there? In other words, is it paid to the landowner? Is this a compensation issue? Is it surveying? Help me through what you think are key provisions of a prescriptive easement with respect to water versus this one.
Ms. Bud Phelan.
Chairman Case, Senator Landon, the biggest issues that are different between the water prescriptive easement bill you did and this proposed bill is that for a normal prescriptive easement, as well as in the water statute, the water line had to be open and notorious. And what the courts have defined that to be is that the landowner knows that it's there. They knew that there was a water line there. This is not some kind of hidden feature, that the landowner knew that there was an impact to their private property. This bill does not contain that. The other issue that is in the prescriptive easement requirements under common law, as well as the water bill, is that the use has to be adverse to the landowner's property right. So that if you have, say I've got a fence, or say I've got a water line, and I'm going to acquire that by prescriptive easement on my neighbor's property, the neighbor has to know that if I say get this water line, I'm not going to be able to plow or dig up the water line or harm it in any way. Here with an electric line, you don't have to show that adverse requirement. And so the landowner, say who owns the property and sees the line, are like, this isn't adverse. I am completely for having electricity to my house. Where he may be adverse is if all of a sudden the company comes in, and the way I read this bill, they could, and they say, oh, guess what? We are now upgrading this line because it's a transmission line, and it's going to have much bigger poles. We are now going to get it right to access that line. And oh, by the way, we can't drive down the line. We now are going to get an access, through your front yard, because as Chairman Case pointed out, there are places where these power poles are that you can't drive down the right of way. And so this bill would also grant them access, and it doesn't have a limit like access that's convenient or access that's not through my front yard. None of that is included in this bill. And so I think that showing that adverse use, especially on the access, is the problem. Another place in the bill that I don't know that I exactly understand is, oh, I'm sorry, I don't have the bill. I got the bill language, but I don't have the bill line. And I apologize, I just printed it off the website. So if you're looking at, let's see, let's be. Okay, so if you're looking at page 4, lines 19 through 23, it talks about how the electric company can replace, rebuild, change, which I think is an important word, or repair the delivery system and the surrounding area in accordance with law. That seems to me to be a whole lot bigger than just, we need a prescriptive easement for this electric line. So I think that's where part of the problem comes in. There's also a discussion on access, which was Roman numeral 3. Let me find the right.
I turned my mic off because of the echo. Bottom of the page 3, is that the Romanet 3 you're talking about?
I'm talking about the one that says may access, use, maintain.
But that's bottom of page 4.
Okay, I apologize. Next time I'll print off.
Yeah, the trick is when you go to the website, when that bill that comes up, if you look over, there's one that says introduced, and you get a PDF that looks like these pages. It
Okay.
makes it a lot easier, but it's okay. We'll work with you.
Printing, I do
It's-
apologize.
No worries.
All right, so I understand that when you're like repairing a water line in the same place and you have to tear up somebody's road because that's the water line goes under the road, that makes sense to me. They've got that same requirement in a bill for electric power lines. I'm not sure why you would be stopping somebody from driving down the road to their house because you've got 3 or 4 days fixing a power line. It just doesn't, I think they lifted that language exactly out of the water bill, but I don't think it applies in this case as a factual matter. So
I guess it might apply if the service was not overhead service.
that, and
There's a possibility.
that may be, but if they're talking about fixing easements for these old power lines, they didn't start burying power lines until much later. And so I'm not sure that factually, by the time they got around to burying power lines, people were thinking about easements, not about, I just need to get power to my house or my barn.
So there are countries now, like Germany, where they have a major effort to go to DC power. I'm so sorry, we've got too many mics on. If you don't need it, turn it off. To go to DC power, and they're actually burying most of the DC lines. That's their plan anyway. So it's incredible. They're spending a lot of money to do that.
Yeah, we're starting to see that.
Go
here,
ahead.
And I think that's, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead. I was asking you.
Yeah, Chairman Case, I mean, I actually like the buried power line idea, but if you're talking about a transmission line with a big pole and 3 or 4 lines hanging off of it, which I believe is included in this bill, they're not burying those, they're putting up big silver towers.
But they are in Germany.
Yeah.
It's crazy. They really are. Okay, any other questions for the Phelan Law Group? Senator Dockstader.
Mr. Chairman, for the Phelan Law Group, then is there any part of this bill you can see that you could work with?
Mr. Phelan.
Mr. Case, Senator Dockstader, I believe the overall intent of what they're trying to accomplish is probably something that we can work with. We realize that there are, some difficult landowners. And I think that, from traditional prescriptive easement, I can see where they would have a problem on the permission issue. Because case law in Wyoming says that if they're by permission, it can't ripen into a prescriptive easement. So I could see where they could have some difficulty with that. I think that is counterbalanced somewhat, though, by the also established case law of inquiry notice, where if you buy property and there's a power line on it, you can't say that there was no notice and that to try to make the power line go away, because it's there and it's obvious, and what's what the courts call inquiry notice. And I would also, like to point out what I said earlier. This is the reason to justify the existence of eminent domain. You're providing a service. You can't, by agreement, get the property rights that you need. And so then there's the due process and just compensation of eminent domain. And while we don't like that, I think, usually as a landowner, you don't like that. I think that that is actually better than finding out it's been recorded down at the courthouse, and now the burden on you is to, try to go to court. I mean, we don't even know how that would work. So I feel like possibly a very narrow bill that takes those old easements or those old deals where there wasn't an easement, provided that narrow, a narrow scope, because that's our biggest problem here is scope. Then, I think we probably could work something out. And if we can't work something out, I would say again, that is the reason why they have the authority to condemn.
Anybody else? Mr. Fenton, you used a term, you said when a person buys a property, they can't say that the power line wasn't there. What term did you use for that?
It's called inquiry notice.
Inquiry, like to make an inquiry?
Yeah,
Inquiry notice.
yeah.
But some of the other testimony that you all said is that there's no requirement that it be open and notorious, because they took that out. So I'm trying to say, inquiry notice sounds like something is open and notorious to me, but I'm not a lawyer, but you guys said they didn't require that, so help me with that.
So in this bill, they do not.
Right.
Under inquiry notice, it's not like a prescriptive easement. The question is, like somebody would be saying, you don't have an easement, somebody would be saying, we do have an easement. And the courts have said, when you're buying property, you're supposed to look at it. And if you see that there's a power line, or that you see there's a road that somebody is using, then you're on notice now to inquire into that. And you can't just argue later, well, that easement wasn't recorded, so therefore it's gone. Because under traditional law, if you don't record an easement and a bona fide purchaser without notice buys that property, then that easement would go away. But when it's like a road or a power line or something that has been there a long time,
That doesn't happen.
then the buyer cannot say, well, it's gone because it wasn't recorded down at the courthouse.
Okay, that helped a lot. We'll get really, did you have a question, Senator?
No, that's okay. I just.
Yeah. We got lots of people who want to testify. Thank you very much. Who's next on this bill? Who's next on this bill? Oh, we have a representative here. Yeah, and let's do a timeout for housekeeping here. I had no idea this bill was going to take so long. And we have another big bill right behind it. And I'm hoping, and I'm not going to chair the meeting for the net metering bill, but we may not actually officially get to it today. So what I would like to do is to be accommodating of people that have came here to testify on net metering, so that if you made a special trip here and you can't be here for a continuation of the meeting on Monday, we'd like to give you the opportunity to testify before we adjourn, as well as try to do the same thing with the prescriptive easement bill that's on the table. So if you need to talk to us today about net metering, I want to make sure that we can handle that, and we'll turn the meeting over to Senator Landon to do that kind of out of order. It's at the point of, say, 15 minutes to or something like that. Is that okay, or 20 minutes to? So we'll go on this bill 20 more minutes. And so, Representative Eichlin. How are you?
Chairman Case, I'm fine. So I'm on this bill, as you can probably look at it and see. And sometimes you get on a bill and don't fully understand what you got yourself into. What I did get myself into is a whole set of, you're all problem solvers. I know you, I know this man. He's busy trying to solve problems, and so is the director of the REA. The overview I have of this bill is it just doesn't give any kind of a even playing field to the landowner themselves. All of it is gifted away. Seems like every landowner right I can imagine is given away in the deal. And then I looked trying to figure out how to amend the thing, and I couldn't quite narrow down how you do that. It sounds like we do have a system, another system in case law that works with prescriptive easements. And if somebody could figure out a way of amending this so that it isn't just it's more or less a taking, you would just, that easement was there for however many years, and the companies could come in, they could go through your property, tear down barns. It said structures, and I thought, what kind of structures might be in the way, or what might they do? The bill doesn't go into that. Recently, in the House, in the joint ag meeting, we had a bill that dealt with eminent domain and really worked hard between land use attorneys, landowners, and power companies, electrical. It was for collection lines, and Senator Steinmetz is well aware of the thing. That thing got changed, our last meeting, to where eminent domain became a thing that you couldn't do. It's gone in that bill. So those are the balances I'm talking about. Let's make sure that the property owners have a balanced, fair way to deal, and as well as the energy companies. We have to have them. And I think that bill got killed, but there's another one that we had worked hard on, had some good people working on, that may show up concerning the eminent domain. This one needs the same thing. It needs a balance between a taking, but some fairness to it. And I don't think anybody in this deal wants to be unfair. I think we want to find a good solution that'll work for everybody. Maybe we stick with the system that works, that Karen Bud Fallon mentioned, or Frank did. I can't remember who did, but anyway.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Representative. Questions for the representative? Senator Landon.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Representative Eklund, you've been one of the best that I've worked with down here through the years, so thank you. I always listen pretty carefully when you come up with something. And it's nice to know that I'm not the only legislator who has signed on to something and later found out, that you might be wandering around out there somewhere. So really just wanted to thank you for stopping by and visiting with us about the bill. So.
Anybody else? So just to plant a seed out there, is there tolerance when it comes to the appropriate time to perhaps, we could lay this bill back and let people meet on it for a couple of days. We're not at the end of the world, and our workload doesn't seem to be so terrible. But is that a conceivable possibility, Representative? And we've got senators jumping up now. Senator
Thank you,
Cooper.
Chairman Case. I think that would probably be the wisest thing to do in the interest of time here. We've got some really important legislation coming up in front of us here in a few minutes. I'm thinking that this bill, if we're going to bring it forward, is going to need substantial rework that's going to probably change the whole bill. So I'd like to go back to the folks that brought this to me and see if we can get back up on the road and out of the weeds a little bit and really come back to this committee with the answers that you really deserve to to know whether or not we should move this bill forward or not. So I'm not sure the process here, but I think I'd like to have it laid back for a few days.
It's hard to argue with the prime sponsor, isn't it? Senator
What
Dockstader.
about Mr. Chairman, what about the concept of a substitute? Thoughts there?
Well, I think that is a possibility. You know, if it was actually, if it was so rewritten that the standing committee amendment would be a substitute bill, we could stand on that, but maybe they could work within this bill. I hate substitute bills because it seems like a bait and switch to the public, but, and they don't have as much time, but we can decide that at the appropriate time. If we have a commitment by the parties to maybe get together and work, I suspect the utilities are not too happy about this, and Mr. Taylor, you've got your thumbs up. Okay. So why don't we do this? Committee, let's just lay this back without prejudice. And who, would somebody on the committee like to oversee this to make sure it gets done? Or Senator Cooper, are you going to be in charge of that?
Chairman Case, yes, I'll be in charge of that. It's, I brought the bill to you, and so it's my responsibility as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Steinmetz?
I'd like to volunteer to work with you on that. I was looking back at our prescriptive easement bill that we had crafted in the Select Water Committee, and we need some fairly major reworking of this bill. It's been reorganized in a way that doesn't make as much sense as the bill we had, so I'd be glad to work with you on that. I don't know that I have a lot of time this weekend, but if we could lay it back a couple of days, then we could work on it next week.
So I think our restriction is what's the last day to bring a bill out of committee? And I don't know that off the top of my head, but that is our restriction. I'm guessing it could be towards the end of next week, but I don't know. It would be on our calendar, and if somebody wanted to look that up, if they had time to look that up, but fine, we will work within that constraint. So right now, well, that's not that far off, really, because next week we're in February. Yeah, so it'd be the early part of the following week, I think, is where that works out. So with that, I think we're looking for you guys we'll leave this bill in the committee, but we'll let Senator Cooper and the good representative and other sponsors, Senator Steinmetz, if you wish, work with industry and other interested parties to try to come forward with something we can work with. And go forth. You guys organize it and take care.
Thank you, Chairman Case.
You bet.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you. Senator Landon, would you please take the committee for this bill? And I would hope, Senator, that we don't try to finish this bill today, because there are people that, and I won't take too much on the introduction, so that people that traveled today to speak to us should be able to, and I'll just do a quick introduction. I'm going to run out there, but it's your committee, sir.
Okay, let's, good discussion on that previous bill, committee. I hope we can work that into form, because there's some good reasoning for that bill. But let's go to Senate File 111, net metering revisions. Senator Case, this is kind of an old friend, but this one's modified quite a bit, a little bit different than what we've been considering the last few years. So take it away. Tell us about Senate File 111.
Yes, and Senator, Mr. Chairman, I would propose to give an abbreviated version so we can let others from the public that are here. We have tried to wrestle with the issue of net metering and how it's applied by statute in Wyoming. And Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of confusion about the concept of net metering. It's frequently promoted as a way to stick it to the man, to stick it to your electric utility, to go off the grid, to be energy independent, and to, kind of have homegrown energy and be energy independent. The problem is, Mr. Chairman, every utility in Wyoming has a tariff structure that consists of a couple of elements. One is usually a connection charge or a fixed charge in the monthly bill, and the second element is a charge for energy. The problem is, Mr. Chairman, is that contrary to what people tend to think, the energy charge also recovers the cost of the network. And so the network, the energy, and if you think about it, you may have a customer charge at your utility, it might be up to $40 or $50. It might be $20, depends on your utility. But that doesn't recover all the fixed costs of the utility. Most of the fixed costs, or a considerable portion, is recovered in the per kilowatt hour charge that we all pay for monthly service. And that subsidy's built into it. It's not something I like, but it has one purpose, and that's to provide very small users with small bills. So it's that fixed cost that don't get recovered from net metering producers. And so there's also an issue of timing with net metering, where you're putting energy on the system at one time and you're taking it off on another time. The issue there, Mr. Chairman, is that usually when you're making solar-generated electricity, or it could be wind-generated electricity, but most likely solar, that's the same time the big plant south of Cheyenne is making solar-generated energy. So it's actually very plentiful and not worth a lot to the other customers. But yet when you want to draw on it, when it's not sunny, when it's dark, when it's cold and the days are shorter, that's when electricity is dear. It's expensive to kind of do it. And to try to say what I made in the summer should offset what I need in the winter doesn't recognize that they are two totally different things. And everybody thinks they're only hurting the utility, or we're sticking it to the utility and we're punishing them. They're not. They're punishing their other customers, their neighbors. And they're requiring a subsidy from their neighbors to make up the costs that they're avoiding with this process. That's the bottom line, Mr. Chairman, and that's the problem. And for years, we had declining loads, and the electric utilities weren't in for rate cases. And it was mostly because of the miracle of lighting. New lighting technology has just been so fabulous. It gave us a break of over a decade where we didn't have a lot of rate pressure. That's gone. Especially the major utility in Wyoming has been in for their second rate case in 2 years. They got the first ones under court order. And that's the situation where the utility, the Public Service Commission, has to make the utility whole. They always get to be made whole because they get paid for the investment that they have been devoted. That's when the rates shift to the other customers. And Mr. Chairman, this bill is virtually the same as the bills that you've seen before, but there's one significant difference. The difference is that somebody that has an existing system and owns that existing system and keeps that existing system is grandfathered under the current system for as long as they have it. So the grandfathering, I kept trying to do a 10-year, we did 5 years, we had all these things where their rates would change after a certain time. That is not in this bill. They are grandfathered under existing rates for as long as they own the system, and that's the bottom line. The new rates are to be determined by the Public Service Commission. We're not telling them how to do it, but we're telling them to use the tried and true standard that public utility rates are set to be just and reasonable. And that's the time of it, Mr. Chairman. I will shut up so that other people can take advantage of this time if they can't be here on Monday.
Well, Senator, thank you. Appreciate you giving an opportunity for people, because people have shown up today and hoping to testify on Senate File 111. So any questions of the Senator at this point? Okay, thank you. I want to go to testimony on this bill for anyone who's from out of town. Do we have anybody here from out of town? Okay, if that doesn't matter, please come forward if you'd like to testify on Senate File 111 this morning.
I think there is an agency here.
I guess we do have an agency here. Let's hear from the public service folks. I apologize. in my haste to get to people who might be here from out of town, I skipped over the top of you, Public Service Commission, and I did not mean to do that. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Senator Landon. Chris Petrie from the Public Service Commission. I'm the deputy chairman there. And up at the table with me is John Burbridge, our chief counsel.
Gentlemen, for
Chairman
being
Throne
here.
is also in the room, as well as our DOE fellow.
Mr. Petrie, jump into this and give us a perspective on it so that we can get to some testimony from folks who are here. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you. Senator Landon, as Senator Case alluded to, the PSC exists primarily to ensure just and reasonable rates. So we've looked at this bill with that in mind, and I think that it in fact does create a path to establishing just and reasonable rates for utilities and the treatment of net metering customers. The application after December 31st, 2025 for new customer generators, that does protect those existing net metering customers, the people who have made investments in these systems, and they would be, the new customer generators would have their rates set, or the utilities rates set, according to the usual Public Service Commission public process. That's our specialty, just and reasonable rates. We have that as our top priority at all times. There has been identified in the past, and some of you may remember several years ago, there was some data provided by Denise Parrish of the Office of Consumer Advocate and Bryce Freeman that illustrated how this subsidy is produced by the existing rate structure. It has quite a bit to do with a provision in the existing statutes that prohibits any charging of differential rates for net metering customers. It's apparent that is an obstacle to setting just and reasonable rates, and with the Public Service Commission empowered to address those special conditions of net metering customers, that would, I believe, stand a very good chance of being resolved for the future. We've watched other states who have had a lot of instability in the net metering area, and generally by over encouraging it or over discouraging it, and then having to make adjustments as they go along and as the penetration level increases. We are still at a point where we have, I believe, in the low to mid single digit percentages of net metering penetration in the state. And there's a big advantage to allowing for the establishment of just and reasonable rates while you have that condition with a relatively low penetration rate. That means that net meters that come along from now on, or from December 31st on, would have rates set by an established and proven public process. It would eliminate the likelihood, or vastly reduce the likelihood, of drastic revisions in the future. The further you go with a deficiency in the rate-making process that, as I mentioned, is sort of imposed by the existing statute, the more drastic your corrections might have to be in the future, therefore the more damaging to the expectations of people who have invested in these systems. This also eliminates a monthly true-up issue for existing customer generators, or, excuse me, for yes, I believe for all customer generators. And then it also corrects a bit of a problem with the specific date for truing up for excess generation by taking out the January 1st of each year or end of the year requirement. There are issues with that basically occur with multi-state utilities who are trying to deal with their net metering customers under more than one statutory scheme or rate construct scheme. And that can force them to have multiple billing cycles or billing approaches for different states. And some of these multi-state utilities are not Pacificor or a big company at all. Some of them are small cooperative utilities that span state lines.
So, Mr. Petrie, I'm going to ask you to wrap up comments if you can real quickly. I want to be sure and get to our public.
Certainly.
And hopefully, our Public Service Commission could be around next week. Any final thoughts on the bill? And then I do want to move to the folks that are here to testify, if that's okay.
Senator Landon, to conclude, we understand what the PSC would be called on to do here. It is our main function, and we would be told by this statute to establish just and reasonable rates. The statutory impediment to that would be eliminated for the future, and the existing net meters would be protected by this indefinite grandfathering provision. It appears to us to be a fair approach to addressing this problem that we've identified in the past. It's been discussed at length, and it continues to exist.
Deputy Commissioner, thanks. Really appreciate it. Good thoughts. Thank you for being here. Let's, who'd like to testify on Senate File 111? Please come forward. Let's expedite, get on up here so that we can get you guys to a microphone. I would ask you to get right to it, and we have about 15 minutes left before we've got to get upstairs. So if you could keep it within the bounds so that neighbors can testify also.
Well, I hate
Good
to
morning.
ask this. I'm going to use about 7 minutes of it for a prepared statement.
Well, take as much as you want, and
Well,
if you
I'll,
block some people out, they'll just have to.
I understand that, and I appreciate that.
Okay, I'm just asking you
And
to be as
I don't-
brief as you can, because I want to get to everybody, so take it
Okay.
away.
Well, for those of you who don't know me, those of the committee know me, my name is Dick Merklin. I represent Wyoming Solar Coalition with a membership of close to 400 owners of renewable resource energy systems, wind and solar. These are residential and small business owners spread across the state. We fall under the net metering statutes, Title 37, Chapter 16, Article 1, net metering, Section 37, 16, 101 through 104. These have been in effect since July 1st of 2001. Since the summer of 2019, these statutes have been under attack by members of the Wyoming legislature, the power utilities, and numerous cooperatives in the state. Bottom line is, these groups want to gut the net metering statutes or eliminate them altogether. The reason for this is money. Always is. This bill wants to create a new class of ratepayers within an already existing class, the current owners of these systems. And this bill wants to treat them differently. This is flat out discriminatory. You cannot do that. You should know that Wyoming joined several other states that have made decisions in favor of net metered customers. Kansas, Arkansas, Arizona, New Mexico, to name a few. The Wyoming PSC cannot establish an appropriate compensation system that is not going to be discriminatory in its application. On August 30th, 2024, the Wyoming State Supreme Court handed down a decision. Case number is S-230276 in the Powder River Basin Council and Wyoming Outdoor Council in High Plains against High Plains Power. This decision is 10 pages long. Basically, High Plains Power discriminated against 94 of their customers who own net meter systems. They cut the compensation being paid to these customers by 80% or more. The court concluded that the PSC had erred when it presumed avoided cost was a just and reasonable rate for monthly compensation. The court reversed that thinking on August the 30th last year. Rather than quote paragraphs 26 and 28 in total, suffice it to say, the PSC has broad authority in regulating public utilities, Title 37, but we are not dealing with a public utility here. The net metering statutes apply to customer generators, which by definition are not public utilities. The PSC has no authority over the amount of public utility credits or compensates a net metering customer generator for excess monthly generation. Net metering customer generators are specifically excluded from the definition of public utility. Public Service Commission, their authority derives solely from net metering statutes, and under the statutes, PSC is limited to regulating the safety components of customer-generated facilities. The Public Service Commission's authority over net metering is limited to safety and system reliability. The PSC has no authority to interpret, enforce, or otherwise exercise power or discretion over the credits or compensation paid to customer generators for excess monthly generation. As such, this bill, SF-0111, needs to die as it's outside the law and the court's decision. Thank you.
Mr. Merklin, thank you. Any questions for Dick? Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
And by the way, we will be taking this bill back up on Monday morning, along with another bill. I guess the other one probably won't be ready Monday, but this one will, and so we'll continue this on Monday. Let's try to get.
Senator, may I, one last. You could make everything easy for everybody and just kill it now. It needs to go away.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else like to come forward and visit with us about Senate File 111? Again, you're probably going to have another opportunity on Monday, but you're welcome to come up. And then we're going to have to close out here in a few minutes and get upstairs. So, Representative, good to see you. Please introduce yourself.
Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the committee. It's good to see you all as well, too. As you probably know, my name is Andy Schwartz. I'm here representing the town of Jackson. I'm going to go back in time a little bit. I'll be brief. As Senator Dockstader is aware, a little over 15 years ago, the town of Jackson, Teton County, and Lower Valley Energy formed a tripartite agreement. And the reason they did this was because there was a concern that as demand for electricity increased, the ability to get cheap energy was going to diminish, and Lower Valley was going to have to find other sources of power that were going to substantially raise the rates for the citizens and businesses. Part of that has been a desire to encourage the use of solar by small businesses and individuals for net metering. The concern of the town of Jackson right now is that this bill, rather than incentivize that development, is creating a level of uncertainty about what the future for net metering is going to be, and therefore the ability to prevent these rate increases will diminish. And I think that roughly I can go into more detail, but in the interest of time, I will stop and stand for any questions. One other comment. As a former legislator, I would like to commend Chairman Case because this has been an issue he has shown passion and interest in for quite some time. I think he is moving in the right direction, but I think there still is some ways to go. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Mr. Schwartz. Thank you. It's always good to see you. Questions for Mr. Schwartz? Thanks for coming up this morning. It doesn't look like we have a lot of fervor to come up and testify today, knowing that we will take it up on Monday. I think it's about time for us to get upstairs. So Senate File 111 will be laid back until Monday. We'll resume our consideration of that bill and have a great weekend, everyone. It's good to see you.